Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. Delighted to be joined by Dave Dayen, executive editor with the American Prospect. Does great work on policy, among other things. And, I've been hearing a lot of hand wringing in the corporate media about the quote spoiler of Cornel West and no labels that might steal the election from Joe Biden. But I haven't really heard things that Joe Biden could do to maybe persuade Democratic voters who are considering a third party. According to the polls, more Democrats are open to a third party than Republican voters. And the prospect in the beginning of the Biden administration had a great in-depth series on executive actions that President Biden could take unilaterally. I wanted to start with the climate crisis. It's not just a matter of, it's the summer and it's hot. The Atlantic Ocean, record temperatures, coral reefs are bleached and dying. You have cables melting underneath the street in Europe, which is knocking AC off. Obviously, you have things going on in Antarctica right now that they have not seen, is only supposed to happen in terms of the heat, or ice once every 13 billion years. So I would say we're in a pretty dire situation. From the reporting, Biden is going to make an announcement today on his plans for the climate crisis. Does not sound quite like a Marshall Plan. Sounds more like some incremental things, water delivery, things like that. Can you talk about, in terms of climate, what can Biden do unilaterally that goes beyond the Inflation Reduction Act, which obviously, handed out the tax incentives for renewables?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, certainly you don't expect to have a 1,000-year flood every other week. That just, do the math on that. That doesn't, these are unusual times and they call for rather desperate measures. We did that series, the Day One Agenda, on the premise that it would be difficult to get a whole lot out of Congress. Now, what ended up happening is you mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act, which does provide a great deal of public investment, particularly into clean energy. And I should say, we've seen a great deal of spending under that. Manufacturing construction for things like battery plants, renewable energy plants, solar manufacturing, things like that, has quadrupled in the last year. I mean, it's really quite an interesting scenario. But of course, what are we talking about? We're talking about manufacturing construction. Like, we're just at the beginning. They have to build the plants first, then they get to make the stuff, and then they get it out and install it, and then we get the benefits in terms of reducing our carbon footprint. So unfortunately, the nature of reshoring and manufacturing and trying to put these things forward is necessarily going to be pretty slow. The other big thing that is done through the IRA is electric vehicle rebates. Yes, they're $7,500. It's a decent federal rebate, but the average cost of an electric vehicle is well over $50,000. The average cost of a car at this point, a new car, is over $50,000. And so, obviously that's an impediment to people who make that much or less every year, right? So, this is going to be a long, slow process, unfortunately. Now, what can Biden do in the interim? I think what he is announcing today are some steps on workplaces that suffer extreme heat, people who work outside, people who, or whether it's in agriculture or other things, and making sure there are standards in terms of water breaks, in terms of shading, to make that bearable at all. We have heard stories of people just dropping in this extreme heat. Whether it's, delivery drivers or whoever. So, I think he could even go further on that and put in an actual standard through OSHA on extreme heat, which has not been done. There are certainly other things. A lot of climate activists think that the president should call a climate emergency. It's unclear exactly what this would entail, but it would probably free up some resources. One thing that I think is interesting that the administration has done to a certain degree, but could go much further, and I actually did a story a couple of weeks ago on this, is using a Korean War era law called the Defense Production Act, which is supposed to accelerate production for national security purposes. There's no greater national security challenge right now than the climate crisis. And so you can use the DPA to make sure that all the materials needed for the energy transition are prioritized. You literally tell companies, like, you have to build this first.
Right.
We use this a lot during COVID, actually, to get PPE and masks and things like that into production rapidly. And you could do the same thing for the climate crisis. So there are a few things that I think are out there.
What about what he ran on? I mean, he ran on halting drilling on public lands. I mean, that was one of the
has not done that.
I mean, young people, according to the polls, are really kind of fleeing Biden right now. Obviously, they came together during the midterms and helped the Democrats overperform. But Biden could shut down oil and gas leasing on federal lands. Your piece pointed to a legal analysis published in 2019 by former Interior Department Solicitor John Leshy. He could. I think we both agree that's a pipe dream, but these are things he could still do that might galvanize young people who definitely one or 1B in terms of issues is the climate crisis.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, we know about what the approvals of the Willow project in Alaska. We know about approvals of other pipeline projects. In the debt limit deal, there was an approval of the Mountain Valley pipeline out in West Virginia. It was sort of a gift to Joe Manchin in exchange for his vote a year earlier on the Inflation Reduction Act. So, yeah, I mean, I think on public drilling, there has not been sort of the intensity of the response that you really need. There was also some legal issues. They had a setback in court when they tried to put a pause on some of this work. What they are doing now is they've increased the royalty rate, but that's just cutting government in on a fossil fuel deal, right? I don't know that, you know, to the extent that it you know, prevents certain projects, maybe that's good, but I don't know that gets you all the way there.
Right. And also, obviously, keeping the theme of young people who, you know, could be decisive, particularly if there is a third party alternative. Student loans. I mean, Biden. We could get into whether $10,000 to $20,000 was enough. I don't think so. But I mean, Elizabeth Warren ran on using the Higher Education Act to cancel student loan debt. Can you kind of talk about what options Biden has now after the Supreme Court, you know, tossed out his student loan debt? Can he still technically enforce or cancel what he wants to, which is $20,000?
Right. Yeah, they're doing that right now. Actually, there are meetings being held around this. So yeah, let's talk about it. So there were a couple options for what authorities the president could use to cancel student debt. One, which was discussed by us and also in the campaign by Senator Warren, was the Higher Education Act of 1965, which says, you know, the Secretary of Education has pretty widespread discretion to compromise, settle, cancel student loans. Then there was the HEROES Act, which you know, said in a national emergency, the Secretary of Education could waive or modify any law that would make you know, ensure that someone's borrowing situation isn't made worse by the emergency. And so that's what they used or tried to use to in their initial plan for student debt. Unfortunately, it was overturned by the courts. Now they are saying we're going back to Plan B, which I would say is really Plan A, using the Higher Education Act. Unfortunately, they have to go through a regulatory process to do that. And, or some say they don't, but this is what they've decided to do. So they have to go through a series of stakeholder meetings in order to finalize these rules and go forward with the student debt. I have argued, and I did a long piece describing this. It's very technical, it's very wonky, but I did it a couple of weeks ago, how their Plan B for this. The other thing they're doing, and I think it's actually kind of interesting, and I wish more people knew about it, is they've changed what is called the income-driven repayment option. And what that means is that someone's monthly payment on a student loan would be based on their income. So if you make, and under the current rules, I think it's if you make $20,000 a year or less, you don't pay at all. And then you pay on a sliding scale up from that. And after a certain period, I believe it's 20 years, if there's a balance, it gets canceled. The Biden administration has changed that to say, if you make $30,000 a year or less, you will pay nothing. And then the sliding scale only goes up to a 5%, 5% of your income, and not 5% of your income, but 5% of what they call your discretionary income. And so that means that they, the basic necessities to live on, they take those out, and then they say 5% of what's left, that's what you have to pay. Currently, it's 10%. So this program is actually pretty powerful. There was a report from, I think it was the Penn Wharton Budget Center, that said that if you go through this process and you look at how much debt would be canceled at the very end of the process, it would actually be more debt cancellation than the plan that we all know about, the canceling of $20,000. The problem is you have to sign up for it. And there hasn't been as much take up as there needs to be to get people in that program. The other thing is that there have been a lot of problems with this thing. Income-driven repayment has been around for about 25 years. A few years ago, there was a report from the National Consumer Law Center that said only 32 people had gotten forgiveness at the end of the income-driven repayment process, even though there were 8 million, I think, past the 20 years of payments. So the Biden administration actually fixed that, and they gave 800,000 borrowers just a couple of weeks ago. They gave them, I forget the total number of debt cancellation, but they gave them, several billions of dollars to those 800,000 borrowers of debt cancellation, because there were payments that weren't counted. The private servicers that we have that handle the day-to-day operations on these loans were basically not doing their job, and so that was fixed. So I think there are some things that can be done in the student loan process. The problem, perception-wise, is that come October, students are going to have to pay their loans again. There's been a 3-year pause, more than 3 years, on the payment of student loans. And, regardless of who's responsible, who's actually, trying to get debt cancellation, people are going to see that under Joe Biden, they had to start paying their student loans again. And, right. And it's going to be a chaotic process. Like, we know it's going to be a chaotic process. I wrote a long piece about that as well, about the fact that these servicers, a lot of these loans have changed hands. People are going to get these payment requests from companies they never heard of. There's transferring over loans inevitably causes problems. The amounts might be wrong. So it's going to be chaotic. And ultimately, a young person who maybe doesn't pay attention to politics a lot, doesn't know that the Supreme Court can't nullified this thing, that Biden tried to give them debt relief. All they know is they're going to get a bill, and they're probably going to blame Joe Biden, right? So,
well, there's another element. I don't know if you guys have written about it yet. Seems to be a bit of a car bubble, because at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of auto loans being handed out. Yeah. Not exactly the same as the housing, the terrible fraudulent housing mortgages, sure, but perhaps a lot of loans to people who really couldn't pay it. I mean, you're talking like 82 month loans
Yeah.
on rental cars, and too good to be true financing that now are kind of screwing people who needed a car during the pandemic. So they're paying obscene amounts per month on their cars, and then you have to start repaying your student loan debts.
Really good. We'll have to take a look at that. I mean, one of the big problems, of course, is that when the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was put into place to monitor, these predatory loans and things like that, there was a carve out that was made for auto dealers. And that's because there are a lot of auto dealers in Congress, frankly. That's why that carve out was made. And they've never been able to get that back. And so auto dealers are largely regulated at the state and local level, and that's just not really an adequate framework. And CFPB is barred from doing so. So that's a very difficult situation.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you also about lowering prescription drugs. We know that.
Sure.
According to Inflation Reduction Act, they say we've lowered prescription drugs. I've interviewed Michael Leidy of the Sanders Institute. Right. Proof will be in the pudding. That's not going to happen until I believe 2026. We don't quite know. We don't really know which drugs, and we'll wait to see. It's not immediate, but you guys did write about he could take action to force drug companies to lower prices. The American Prospect referenced the anthrax scare years ago, and Cipro, where there was executive action taking to make Cipro, which I believe was made by Bayer at that point, available to anyone. Can you kind of talk about what more could he do now to lower prescription drug prices?
Absolutely, and I think this is an area that's really critical. In the Inflation Reduction Act, there was this new provision to actually negotiate the prices of prescription drugs in Medicare, which we'd never done before, and were explicitly barred from doing by the Medicare Part D program when it was passed in 2003. As you say, that won't come online till 2026. So, how do you, as a presidential candidate running for re-election, brag about that? Like, this is something that no one's going to see during your re-election, not for even 2 years after your potential re-election. So they have done some other things. The price of insulin has been capped for Medicare recipients to $35 a month. And somewhat as a result of that, and as a result of another law, the three main insulin manufacturers have dropped their list prices. So that's been actually, I think, a good outcome of the administration. However, could they do more? Absolutely. And they've actually rejected doing more. There is a thing that we wrote about that you just referenced called march-in rights, where if a drug that was developed with government support, and practically all drugs are, if they are delivering that drug at exorbitantly high prices, the government, under the Bayh-Dole Act of 1980, has the ability to step in and seize those patents and give them to companies who will produce that drug affordably. And there was this test case where it's a cancer drug that sells for about 4 to 6 times the price here as it does in every other country in the world. There are already FDA-approved generics ready to go, but they can't because the current drug patent holder has exclusivity rights for a number of years, and they asked the government, some cancer patients who actually take this drug and spend thousands of dollars a year on it, asked the National Institutes of Health and the Health and Human Services Department to march in and take these patents away and give them to the companies that will make them more affordably. And they rejected this. The NIH and HHS rejected this. There's a current review being undergone, but it's clear that NIH, who has frankly a lot of officials in it who get royalties from prescription drug sales and don't want to kill the golden goose. They're not interested in doing this, and right. It's a real problem for the Biden administration. Just in the last 2 days, Donald Trump has come out and said, talked about drug shortages, which we're seeing a lot of right now, because the active ingredients are all made in China, and there are a variety of market structure reasons why we're seeing a lot of shortages, including in like critical cancer drugs, penicillin, Adderall, just all kinds of drugs that you just can't find. And he's hitting Biden on that. And you know what? That's going to resonate if you're in that situation where you need a life-saving medication and it's in shortage or it's too expensive. That's going to resonate with you.
Right. And also, I think one of the things that really helped Trump, I mean, he was full of it and not really a populist, but was bashing the bailouts from the financial crash and all that. Mm-hmm. We're still seeing them. I mean, Silicon Valley Bank, some lesser banks, American Prospect wrote about, overhauling the business of Wall Street, kind of talk about what he could do further.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Silicon Valley Bank was a large regional bank that, because of interest rate policy, because the Federal Reserve was rising interest rates, that created this mismatch, and suddenly the value of their assets, which were long-dated securities, were not as much as they thought, and that led to a crash. I think in the aftermath of that, there are some steps being taken to increase bank capital. Banks are really angry about that. They're artificially changing the mix of their deposits and claiming that they don't have as many high rolling deposits, like over $250,000 above the FDIC limit. The FDIC just called them on the carpet for that recently. Are we? What we're seeing is an interest among the banking industry to team up and get bigger. PacWest and Bank of California just announced a big merger. There have been several others. And there's a split in the Biden administration over whether this is desirable or not. The team merger is the Treasury Department, Janet Yellen, and some of her allies. And team bank mergers are really, really harmful. Is Rohit Chopra at CFPB and the antitrust authorities, where Biden has done a really good job, I should say. People like Lena Khan at the FTC and Jonathan Cantor, who's the head of the antitrust division of the Justice Department. And there's a fight. There's like an ongoing fight right now. A lot of times we think about the Biden administration, we think about it as one thing. It's not one thing. Like there are factions within this within the administration, and there's like an open war going on right now.
You got Clintonites, you got Obamaites, you got some
and you have
labor,
some progressives. So this in particular bank merger policy. They are supposed to revise the guidelines for bank mergers, and whether or not, what we've seen over the last several years is the Federal Reserve has gotten about 5,000 or so bank applications in the last 30 years for mergers, and they haven't rejected a single one of them. So there is a desire among some progressives in the administration to change the policy and actually go by the guidelines of the Bank Merger Act of 1956, which says that you have to put a skeptical eye on financial institutions getting bigger, and what the implications are for customers, the implications are for stability of the banking system, and there are pockets of the administration that thinks, oh well, banks are some of these large regional banks are in a tough spot. They should just team up and get bigger. Right. So we're seeing a fight over that right now in real time. It's interesting.
And I found what I was going to reference, but this is Dodd-Frank, obviously, didn't end too big to fail, but it did, however, establish a process that requires banks to draw up a living will, providing that they can go bankrupt without triggering financial crisis. Regulators evaluate these plans, and they have the authority to restructure a bank if the living will doesn't pass their smell test. This could be a meaningful tool. It seems like that could be effective in terms of some of what we've seen.
I mean, we do see stress tests, and they are still writing these living wills. Largely, they're being approved. The interesting thing that we saw during the Silicon Valley Bank crisis is that you saw this flight of deposits, and a lot of them went to the big banks because there was this belief that the big banks are too big to fail. And that's a dangerous belief, right? I mean, that puts us back in the situation that we were in back in 2008. The whole idea of Dodd-Frank is it was supposed to end too big to fail. But indeed, during this crisis, when one of the banks went under, it was bought by JP Morgan Chase, right? And so we're just seeing sort of the rich get richer here. And I don't know that the living will process is seen, by bank regulators as a legitimate way to downsize these institutions. And maybe it should be.
And one of the last ones I wanted to ask you about, obviously, this is, Crime Bill Joe. It's 2023. You don't think it might excite, some voters that are considering going elsewhere and not voting? Legalize weed? What can he do?
Oh, absolutely.
He's tweaked a little bit here and there, kind of decriminalized, or
there's been some more research. He's loosened up on marijuana research, which because it's a controlled substance under the Controlled Substance Act, it's difficult to approve federal funding for anything involving marijuana because allegedly illegal at the federal level. There's also the situation of banks in the states doing business with legal businesses, since in many states marijuana is legalized, but banks are under national charters and they're reluctant because they could be taken on by the feds if they work with what is at the federal level on the legal substance. So what makes it an illegal substance? There's a schedule under the Controlled Substances Act. It's a Schedule I drug, and that's what makes it illegal. That it could be descheduled. It could be moved off of that schedule. And the Biden administration has simply, not been that interested in doing that. They haven't raided banks or anything for working with marijuana or cannabis businesses. They haven't really, had this policy of harassing legalized cannabis in the states. And now we're at a point where I think the majority of all states at least legalize medical marijuana, right? And a lesser number, but a significant number, I think it's about a third of the US population lives in states where it is legal. But yes, are there things that the federal government can do to make it effectively legal everywhere? Yeah, they could do that.
Wonder how much that might have to do with their big pharma donors not wanting marijuana legalized, since it might make some of their products not necessary.